Hello and welcome to the LLG Grapevine podcast. You're listening to Helen Bennett, LLG's Executive Director of Policy and Governance, and Dennis Hall, LLG Bulletin Editor.
Hello, everyone.
Now, just before we start, Dennis, I have to say what a fantastic MO conference AMO held last Friday. Local government reorganisation, of course, was on the table, AI featuring heavily. We had a great session on holding your nervous system, which was, aimed at the well-being of our members. But I learned a lot there. So the whole day was packed full of helpful information and, importantly, lived experience, because that's where the benefit comes from.
Excellent.
So thank you to everyone who took part in that. And of course, thanks to Bevan Britton for sponsoring the entire event and providing a wonderful social occasion with obligatory drinks post-conference. So I also heard, Dennis, they had bento boxes for lunch. So I was gutted not to be on the ground for that. But let's make a return to the grapevine. So, Dennis, what's up first?
Well, yes, I begin today with the headline, Council login details thought to be stolen in Russian cyber attack. This is the news that login credentials belonging to staff at UK councils have been exposed as part of a large-scale cyber campaign attributed to Russian hackers.
Do you know, this is worrying. I mean, according to a report in the Telegraph, it was in the newspaper, a list of compromised accounts which it had seen included credentials belonging to local government officials, the NHC, and even IT staff at British embassies in both Thailand and Mauritius.
And it also reported that compromised credentials are being offered for sale on dark web forums for as much as £44,000, and said the breach also affected overseas Foreign Office staff, NHS organisations and other critical infrastructure. Now, multiple industries, including government services around the world, fell victim to the attacks, according to an investigation by cybersecurity firm SOC Radar.
Yeah, this is something that needs to be taken incredibly seriously by the sector. The National Cyber Security Centre, and by that way, their website has lots of helpful information. Yes. It's since warned, since this happened, that organisations using Fortinet firewalls and VPN gateways to carry out checks on their devices and factory reset any devices they believe might have been compromised. Now, describing the attack, the National Cyber Watchdog said that the programs had been targeted as part of a global campaign with some indications of potential impact in the UK.
Very worrying. And it added, a database of credentials has been leaked by a threat actor following brute force dictionary and credential stuffing attempts, this is what the terms are, against what are known as internet-facing FortiGate and VPN portals. Going on, they said, credential stuffing is a method where attackers use passwords stolen from one web service to try to access accounts on other services, taking advantage of any reuse of username and password combinations.
Yeah, well, that's the key, isn't it? And the people still perpetuate the one password for everything, and that's so dangerous. So the the National Cyber Security Service, I don't know why I struggle with those combination of letters, recommended that UK organisations using Fortinet Edge devices with, now wait for this technical, SSL VPN enabled to investigate potentially malicious activity on the device and monitor their network for unusual activity.
And the centre has set out a 9-step approach on its website. We won't go through that here, but go to the ncsc.gov.uk website /news for more detail on that. Now, this is a timely reminder that councils should regularly review, as you say, and test the resilience of their systems and protocols. Let us know on our forum page, by the way, whether your council experienced a cyber attack and the steps you took and what was the outcome.
Well, there's been quite a few, hasn't there?
There have.
So hopefully there's lessons learned. Actually, we might look at that, see if there's a lessons learned piece. But
yes,
it is for the IT sector, but obviously legal is so implicated through
they need to be aware. They need to be as they say, in the room on this. It's not just for techies, is it? Although many of the things we've discussed there are of a technical nature.
Yeah, so if you've got an opportunity, you're sitting at some form of strategic level, or even just talking to the department, make sure you flag and sort of lead in this area because you can contribute quite substantially, I think.
Yes.
Now, our next item, I want to take us back to something that, despite being the most impacting on, well, my lifetime, I would say, it just appears to have quickly disappeared away from public interest in the main, and that's the COVID inquiry. So where are we up to?
Well, Helen, the UK COVID-19 inquiry continues to move from evidence gathering and public hearings towards the publication of substantial findings and recommendations, and many of those were in the news quite recently, as you mentioned. Uh, the most significant recent development is the publication of the inquiry's Module 5 report on procurement, published on the 14th of July, examining the procurement and distribution of key healthcare equipment and supplies, including personal protective equipment, ventilators, and testing equipment.
Yes, and that well, we've read the headlines previously about what went on there. I mean, the inquiry, it's not going to be a surprise, has concluded that the UK entered the pandemic with significant weaknesses in its preparedness arrangements. The chair, who's Baroness Hallett, found that national PPE stockpiles were in very poor condition, including shortages and expired equipment, and that there were no adequate plans for the emergency procurement and distribution of critical healthcare supplies.
Indeed, and the report identifies 11 key recommendations intended to strengthen preparedness and resilience for future public health emergencies. And no surprises here, they are exactly what you would expect them to be, these recommendations, Helen.
Yeah, Dennis. The procurement report is particularly relevant to local authorities because it reinforces themes that have emerged throughout the inquiry. So, as you've said, preparedness, but governance, record keeping, decision making under emergency conditions, and the need for clear accountability frameworks.
Yeah. Now, although the report focuses primarily on healthcare-related procurement, its findings are likely to inform future expectations regarding emergency planning and for local authorities too, and the management of supply chains across the public sector.
Well, the inquiry has now completed its programme of public hearings and is progressing through the publication of reports arising from its various modules. Now, according to the July 2026 newsletter, this is the COVID newsletter, they issue them all the time. The procurement report is the fifth report issued by the inquiry, and further reports are expected with the next major publication anticipated to address what was Module 6. Now, that's the care sector, so all eyes on that. That will be autumn 2026.
The inquiry's documents archive continues to publish procedural rulings, restriction orders, determinations regarding recognised legal representatives and evidential material across a range of modules. And the archive also contains extensive closing submissions and evidence from Module 9 concerning the economic response to the pandemic. I should mention, Helen, at the top of the bulletin, we still have links to all of these things concerning the COVID-19 inquiry.
Yeah, that's been a standing item right at the beginning, hasn't
has.
it? And people should definitely take a look. So, from a local government legal perspective, I would say that key areas to monitor over the coming months are going to be the government's response to the Module 5 recommendations, publication of the Module 6 care sector report, and any recommendations affecting emergency preparedness, governance structures, procurement controls, information management, of course, and interagency working. And we know that local authorities were not getting the information they needed. And I imagine that plays out across all the agencies. So that's going to be interesting. And I think we'll definitely revisit
Yes.
that this year, Dennis, and
Yes, of
maybe
course.
we'll do a bit of a deeper dive, I think. So, but for now, let's move on to licensing.
Yes, this is an item for our licensing specialists. Licensed venues are set for stronger protection under new government planning proposals. Pubs, theatres, concert halls, live music venues, and other licensed cultural spaces are set to receive strengthened protection under new government plans to reform permitted development rights.
That's right, because under the proposals, any venue listed as what's called an asset of community value, and in future, sporting assets of community value, would be removed from the permitted development right that currently allows certain demolitions without planning permissions. Now, owners would instead need to submit a full planning application, giving local authorities the ability to consider cultural value, heritage significance, and community impact before any demolition is approved.
Yes, and I should add, by the way, Helen, not just licensing specialists, this is one for our planning colleagues
Yeah.
too. The government argues that the change closes a long-standing gap in the ACV scheme. Now, while ACV status gives communities time to prepare a bid if an owner decides to sell, it does not prevent owners from demolishing a building before any sale takes place. And this has left valued venues vulnerable to redevelopment pressures, particularly pubs, theatres, and grassroots music spaces that have faced sustained challenges from rising costs and high street change.
Well, several categories of cultural and community venues, including, as you've said, pubs, theatres, concert halls, even live music venues and memorials, are already excluded from demolition permitted development rights. And many ACVs fall into these groups and are protected today. But the new proposals, I think this is the important point, they're going further by ensuring that all ACVs, regardless of building type, will receive equal protection.
And this means in practice that independent cinemas, rehearsal spaces, community arts centres, heritage pubs, small theatres, and multifunction cultural hubs would no longer be at risk of demolition through permitted development.
Now, tell me, Dennis, what's the difference between a pub and a heritage pub?
Um,
Do you know?
yes, I suppose one might be older than the other, or have a certain clientele, perhaps.
Yeah, there must be some historical element to it, but
Yeah,
I don't know. If anybody knows,
yeah.
can they email in? Because I'm
You caught
interested
me
in
there
that.
with that one.
Yeah, well, I apologize. Put you on the spot, didn't I? Um, we'll find out. We'll find out.
Yeah.
We'll report next time.
Yes, if there are
Um,
any drinkers listening, perhaps they
yes,
could let us know.
I want to say it's something to do with craft ale, but I fear I
Yes,
might
possibly.
be, yeah. Um, the consultation runs until the 5th of August this year, so not long, with responses invited from local authorities, venue operators, cultural organisations, community groups, and residents, although anyone can respond, of course, as is the usual practice.
Indeed. And if implemented, these changes would amend, here's the technical bit, they would amend Class B of Part 11 of the General Permitted Development Order, creating one of the strongest sets of protections for licensed venues to date.
There's interesting momentum on this, isn't there,
Yep.
Dennis? Yeah. Now,
Interesting.
let's move, as is customary, to our fortnightly coverage of Wales, because this is taken from the Welsh Bulletin, this item. So we're going to do a little roundup, I think, of what's been going on. It looks like the first half of July has brought a shift in the Welsh local government landscape, with developments across the board, really: legislation, governance, planning, social care. It's all in there, and it'll be of particular interest to local authority legal teams and those advising the sector in Wales. But as we always say, Dennis, lots of lessons to be learnt from Wales.
Indeed, though, and can I just add before we get further into this, Helen, that the new government in the Senate has now finally published its new committee structure for the Seventh Senate, and this will include a local government committee, and so that will give us the opportunity to report on the work of that committee in the coming months.
Isn't that excellent? Love that.
Mm,
Um, Perhaps the most notable development I'm just going to highlight here
mm.
is the announcement of the Welsh government's first phase legislative programme. I can't say that word. Under its first minister, of course.
Yes, alongside a written statement setting out principles for UK legislation in devolved areas, the programme signals a continued focus on strengthening Welsh policymaking and legislative autonomy. And of particular interest is the proposed introduction of a community right to buy and the incorporation of rural proofing into government decision-making, both of which have the potential to influence future local authority functions and policy development.
Rural proofing. That's
Mm,
an interesting turn of phrase. Well, at Senate level, the seventh Senate, people are trying to catch me out here, I feel. That committee structure, obviously, as you've said, has now been confirmed, and it includes the establishment of the committee. That is being chaired by Carmelo Colasanto, MS. Members in Wales will no doubt be monitoring the work closely as housing delivery planning reform and local government governance does continue to dominate the Welsh policy agenda. Now, children's social care remains another major area of change. The Welsh Government has published further implementation proposals and launched a consultation on moving, as we've talked about this a lot, moving children's social care towards a not-for-profit model, which they're really pushing now to get over the line.
Yes, and a very different approach to the rest of the UK, which is quite interesting, isn't it? Now, we have reported before that the proposals seek to restrict the expansion of for-profit children's residential and fostering services while facilitating transitions to not-for-profit provision in defined areas. Now, given the operational and commissioning implications for local authorities, this is likely to remain a key area of legal and strategic focus over the coming months. And of course, we will be there to report on this.
We will, because it's definitely a model that we could look at within this country, but there are challenges, and hopefully what's going on in Wales will help in any decision making. But I'd be pushing for that. I really would. Building safety also continues to move up the agenda following publication of implementation proposals for the Building Safety Wales Act. Local authorities with housing regulatory and enforcement responsibilities will need to keep a close eye on the emerging implementation framework as secondary measures and operational requirements develop. So they're still in phase. Planning and housing, as I've said, they remain highly prominent across Wales. Recent reports highlight both the continuing pressure to increase housing delivery, which we have in England, and the legal complexities that often accompany major developments. Now, proposed housing schemes in North Wales, concerns around overdevelopment, growing numbers of HMO applications. And I have to say, I'm not surprised about that because of what's going on in the rental sector.
Yes.
Delays affecting major housing proposals and planning application backlogs all demonstrate that competing priorities facing planning authorities, and additional scrutiny is also being applied to enforcement activity. And that's illustrated by reports concerning, there was one case with an unlawful holiday let operation, and ongoing debates surrounding traveller site provisions still prevail.
Yes, and governance and assurance have also been in focus following the publication of Audit Wales' new Code of Audit Practice. Now, the updated code reflects the increasing use of artificial intelligence within the public sector, reinforces principles of proportionality and risk-based auditing, and strengthens expectations around professional skepticism and independence. Local authority governance teams and monitoring officers should review the new requirements carefully in all of this as audit expectations continue to evolve.
Professional skepticism. I love that.
Yes, I like that. It's a good phrase in the current situation, isn't it?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Things like the post office scandal, there wasn't enough of it, was there?
No,
Professional skepticism. We need more of it.
There certainly wasn't. I'll just flag a recent High Court, judgment pertinent for Wales, which is Barstow and others, and Green Generation Energy Networks Cymru Limited, because that case provides an important reminder of the procedural requirements surrounding powers of entry. I know this is niche, but it stood out for me. The court emphasised that notices for survey access must be served on all owners or occupiers and contain sufficient detail about what work will be undertaken, where and when, which seems kind of logical, but I don't believe happens. So just a reminder there.
Indeed. Now, for authorities and organisations exercising statutory entry powers, the decision does underline the importance of transparency, procedural fairness, and robust engagement with affected landowners. So take a look at that judgment in detail.
There we go. Then a lovely tour around matters pertaining specifically to the lovely Wales. So let's move on. Something close to my heart, Dennis. Ever since LLG were able to participate with oral evidence to a select committee on kinship care. So that's where we're going, kinship care.
Yes, the Law Commission has proposed a single new care order for kinship care cases, which it said would benefit some 160,000 children cared for by relations or family friends. The Commission said the current system used multiple court orders, such as child arrangements orders and special guardianship orders, which could produce inconsistent outcomes and be complicated for carers and families to navigate.
Well, it proposed replacing these with a single new kinship care order, which could be made bespoke depending on the child's circumstances. Under proposals being consulted on, as an alternative to the KCO, the Commission suggested various amendments to child arrangement orders and special guardianship orders.
It has also proposed the introduction of kinship parental responsibility agreements, which would allow parents to formally grant parental responsibility to a kinship carer without going to court. Now, this reform was intended to make it easier for kinship carers to engage with schools, doctors, and other services on a child's behalf.
Yes, because that's a huge day-to-day stumbling block, actually,
Yeah.
because of the consent that's required, and it's very complicated from a relationship perspective. So the Commission also proposes changes to how local authorities assess kinship foster carers to improve the consistency and suitability of assessments. And it said the use of disparate approaches amongst local authorities in carrying out assessments should be resolved.
And Professor Lisa Webley, Commissioner for Property, Family and Trust Law at the Commission, said kinship carers play a vital role in keeping children safe and connected to their families. The current law is too fragmented and difficult to navigate. Going on, she said, these proposals would give kinship families a simpler system, clearer rights, and a flexible legal framework that reflects the particular nature of kinship care. Now, the consultation itself is open until the 16th of October.
I very much hope this is going to bring some changes, actually. It's so important. If children cannot remain with their parents, the next best thing is family. Rather than, yeah. Now, turning to our final item of this edition, the government has announced a second phase of Awaabs Law, introducing stricter requirements for social housing landlords and extending legal protections to around 4 million tenants across England. And the new regulations will come into force on the 30th of November this year, and they will significantly broaden the range of housing hazards that must be addressed within very strict prescribed timescales.
Indeed, and we know, of course, that Awaabs Law was introduced following the tragic death of 2-year-old Awab Ishaq in 2020 after prolonged exposure to damp and mould in his family's social housing property. The legislation is intended to ensure that tenants' concerns about dangerous living conditions are responded to both promptly and effectively.
Yeah. So the first phase, which came into force in October of last year, let's just remind ourselves, that established mandatory timeframes for dealing with severe damp and mould. Now, under phase 2, the regime will be extended to 7 additional categories of hazards, which are identified under the Housing Health and Safety Rating System. Now, these include electrical hazards, risk of falls, fire and explosion risks, excess cold, excess heat, structural collapse, and failing elements, and domestic hygiene hazards such as pest infestations.
The regulations introduce clear statutory response requirements. Where a reported hazard presents an immediate danger to health or safety, landlords must investigate and make the property safe within 24 hours. For serious hazards that do not pose an immediate risk, landlords must investigate within 10 working days, provide tenants with a written summary of their findings and proposed actions within three working days of the investigation. And then they must complete any urgent safety work within 5 working days and begin longer-term remedial works within 12 weeks.
Yeah. So for local authorities that own or manage housing stock, these changes, they have significant level of implication and governance implications, most definitely. I mean, compliance will require robust systems for receiving, assessing, and tracking reports of hazards. And local authorities are going to have to move themselves on this. Housing teams are going to need to ensure that inspection processes, record keeping arrangements, and contractor management procedures are capable of meeting the new statutory deadlines. And that contractor monitoring, I always think, has been a weakness within the sector, to be honest.
Indeed, and I hope this will be rectified with this new legislation, of course.
Hmm.
Clear audit trails will also be essential for the reasons you mentioned, particularly where decisions are made regarding the severity of a reported hazard or the appropriate response. And failure to comply may increase exposure to regulatory action, of course, from the ombudsman investigations, and of course, potential legal claims.
Well, it's interesting you mention decisions around the severity. I think that's where we're going to see sort of legal claims coming
Yes.
along. Council's going to have to be very, very clear as to where it places the report in the 24-hour category or the longer category. They're going to have
Mm,
to have some form of robust methodology, and I'm sure there's plenty of guidance out there. But the changes,
mm,
they do reinforce the importance of the recently updated HHSRS, which has been it's been revised for the first time in 2 decades, Dennis.
mm, mm.
And as
Interesting.
more hazards become subject to mandatory response times, it will play an increasingly important role in assessing risk and evidence compliance. And I think it might be one of these situations where if someone is telling you something, you have to act on it with almost a presumed it is that, if you see what I mean, if it's
Yeah,
if it's a
yeah.
potential 24-hour response.
And I hope the local authorities have the resources to properly
Well,
implement
that
these
that's the
provisions, because
concern,
that
isn't
is the
it?
key, isn't it? Well, by the way, the government has confirmed that a third phase expected in 2027 will extend Awaabs Law to virtually all remaining housing health and safety rating system hazards, but with the exception of overcrowding.
Hmm. Well, let's see. Well, we're just going to have to monitor this. We will be spending time
Yeah.
um, looking at the changes and how it's impacting and whether or not there's any legal claims or ombudsman determinations in respect of it as we move through this phase. But let's be clear, Dennis, Awaab's law is continuing to evolve into a
Indeed.
comprehensive system of tenant protection. So I think the message is early review of policies, governance arrangements, and operational readiness as far as possible. And you said about resources, but this
Mm,
is the law. And this again, we come down to what's feasible. But there's no question about it. It has to be. So it's about, I suppose everyone talks about innovation and thinking smarter. It's not as easy as that, but these things will be essential to ensure compliance and
yes,
minimize risk ahead of the implementation later this
indeed.
year. Well, on that note, that's it for another edition of the podcast. You can read more on the items discussed today and many more besides by going to bulletin number 26, available on the LLG website now. So it's goodbye from me.
And from me too. Bye bye now.